All right, here we go. This 3 o'clock hour, leading me up to 4 o'clock. We'll have Mary Hardin Baylor football coach Pete Fredenberg in the next segment. They're playing tomorrow for the national championship again in Division III. Ari Wasserman joins us, theathletic.com, covers college football and also all over National Signing Day and beyond. And Ari, thank you for your time. Besides Travis Hunter, what, in your opinion, might have been the top one or two other biggest National Signing Day stories from yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, one was Keontae Goodwin, who is a five-star prospect from the Louisville area, who flew all the way to Dallas, Texas to make an announcement, only to announce that he had no announcement, which was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And I was actually in attendance at that ceremony. And then he only flew back to Louisville to announce that he was going to stay put with who he was been committed to for the last 6 months and sign with Kentucky, which he did today, which I thought embodied what National Signing Day is all about. And then, of course, just to kind of keep, I guess, the Texas flavor here is just what A&M is doing. A&M right now has the number one class in the 247 composite rankings, and there are 6 remaining five-star prospects in this cycle who have yet to make a commitment, and Texas A&M has a legitimate chance to sign 4 of those players. So, they might sign a 30-person class that has 16 or 17 top 100 players nationally and be the best class in the history of college football recruiting. So, to me, that's something to keep an eye on. And then, of course, the Alabama, Ohio State, and company also had really big days as well.
Well, then Jimbo's turned up the pressure on himself, right? When you have the best class in the history of college football recruiting, you can't go 8-4 anymore, can you?
No, you can't. And if you do, there's a problem. And, I think he knows that. And, to beat Alabama is such an accomplishment for them in the way that they were able to do it this year. It's a program legitimizing win to a certain extent. But the reason why it's been such a hard hill for Texas A&M and everybody else to climb is because Alabama is so freaking talented. Alabama signs 10 to 12 top 100 players every single year. And regardless of staff turnover or roster turnover, they have, in between 6 and 12 first-round draft picks either in the starting lineup or on the roster at any given time, regardless of what happens. And if you can assemble what's the way to beat that? To assemble your roster similarly, and that's what Texas A&M is doing. Now, this is one class, and Alabama does it every year. So, you have to do it 3 or 4 times in a row before you're built like Bama. But still, it's a very big accomplishment, and I'll leave you guys with a stat here. Only 3 teams in the history of the modern-day recruiting rankings, which dates back to 2001, have won a national championship without signing a top 5 class in any of the previous 4 years. And the 3 were Auburn, when they had Cam Newton, and 2 other Clemson teams when they had Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson. Obviously, you can see that the quarterback position played a big factor in that, but those teams also signed top 10 classes in the previous 4 years as well. So it's just impossible to compete at the highest level without recruiting like this. And the good news is that Texas A&M, depending on who you are, if you like them or you don't, is putting themselves in a position to be on a level playing field when it comes to the talent they have on the field in that game.
Well, Ari, I can't help but think forward to 2, 3, 4 years from now, whenever the day comes and Oklahoma and Texas are in the SEC. I mean, between what Texas did in closing yesterday and then what A&M did, I mean, the recruiting battles are going to be, and you throw NIL in there, I mean, the SEC, A&M, Texas battles are going to be insane. What did you think of what Steve Sarkisian was able to do? Obviously, a large class already at 27. But got a handful of flips yesterday morning, and are sitting there at top 5-ish status. So what do you make of the Longhorns class under Sark?
Well, I think that the one thing that people will forget is that the most important get, in my opinion, is the transfer from Ohio State, Quinn Ewers, the quarterback, who's a 5-star player who initially was the number 1 overall player in the 2022 class before reclassifying to 21, signing with Ohio State, and then transferring after having 2 handoffs in his Ohio State career. He's basically an 2022 Ohio State decommit who flipped to Texas on signing day, and he won't be accounted for in their class, but he's certainly a member of this class. Then, of course, what they did with Terrence Brooks to flip a top 100 cornerback out of Ohio State's class, too. I mean, it's impressive, and they're not quite as top-heavy. They got Kelvin Banks, who's fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time when Oregon lost its coach, and Banks reopened his commitment, and they've got Devin Campbell, who's going to be announcing in February between Oklahoma and Texas. So they might be able to get another 5-star commitment in there. But the thing with Texas has always been, can they do the right thing? Can they develop once that talent's on the roster? Because this isn't unique. Texas's class right now is top 5, probably top 3 if you account for Quinn. But they have lacked development. They've lacked, sturdy consistency when it comes to who's leading the program. They've been very dysfunctional in terms of the product we've seen on the field, and culminating with a loss to Kansas this year. And it's never been because they haven't had good players. So I'm very curious to see if Texas can, with the second-year coach, kind of transcend some of that bad juju from the past 10 years and actually overcome that stuff and win something.
Yeah, you can't say it any better than you did, and we said it yesterday. They've had the talent, and they've got another great class, and then again, we've seen what that's meant in the last decade or so. You have a great story, and Ari, I've said this on the show. I work for Sikkim 365 Radio. Also, there's a website. It's got a premium section, but the Athletic is the only additional site of which I pay a premium each month because of the content, and we have a lot of you and many others, Max, etc., on our show. You have a great story about the people behind the scenes, the personnel people. There are 2 or 3 names that have been attached to Baylor, including Ginta, who's a part of the staff right now. He was recognized on this list as somebody who makes a difference. There's obviously James Blanchard, who's now with Joey McGuire at Texas Tech, and then Thomas, who's now at LSU, who was at Baylor as well. How much do these behind the scenes, and A&M's got like 5 names on this list, how much of a difference do these now make, these particular people?
I think that it's very interesting to, be a fan of college football and, really kind of take a step back and think, who as a fan do you credit when things go good and when they go bad? The head coach. The head coach is on the sideline and behind, on Saturdays, and he's behind the podium after National Signing Day, and he's the face of programs. But I don't think people realize how much has changed in the past 6 to 7 years in terms of what these personnel departments have become. There isn't just one assistant coach on the staff that's like in charge of recruiting like they used to, like in 2010. These are NFL GM type positions where they have personnel departments who have, some people are in charge of the visit experience. Some people are in charge of breaking down film. Some are more inclined to talk to prospects. Like, there is so much going on when it comes to this. It's a million dollar business every year. Not just when you think about the budgets these schools have, but just how many people it takes to sign the top 5 class. It's a multi-million-dollar enterprise. So, right now it's very easy to just say, Jimbo Fisher is a really good head coach who has done what he can to put Texas A&M on the map, but that would be a disservice to the 10, 15 people who work under him in the recruiting department that made this possible. The coach is the face of the program, but he's not the only one doing it.
Ari, with Travis Hunter yesterday, it could be seen as a seismic shift in recruiting, or it could be seen as a one-off. Where do you see this landing on the spectrum of things that could change recruiting forever?
I think it's pretty cool, if you're being honest. Like, this has been a trend for a while, right? Young African-American players listing HBCU schools in their top 5 as a way to, promote and get these schools some attention. But Travis Hunter is the first one to ever take a career that will ultimately end up in the NFL, because if you've watched this kid's tape, he's unbelievable. And dedicate his college career to the cause. And if you don't like that, or you think that's crazy, that's your opinion, but I think it's pretty cool. And I think that the idea of this is that if you were very good at football, the way that he is, and you're a transcendent talent who can do things physically that can't be taught in the weight room or on a track, that you can go anywhere in the country and the NFL will find you. And doing so at a HBCU, and doing so playing for a person who played the cornerback position better than anybody on the face of the earth, is a really, really cool story, and I'm excited to see how it pans out. And, I don't know what Deion Sanders is going to do long term. I don't know if it is the most incredible recruiting story of the past 20 years to get the number 1 overall player in a recruiting class to go to a FCS school. And to me, that makes him a legitimate Power 5 candidate immediately. If you can convince somebody, regardless of what the sales pitch is, to do that, then you are worth a risk in recruiting big-time players all the time at a Power 5 place. So I'm very curious to see how long he'll be at Jackson State. Maybe it'll be 10 years, maybe it'll be one more year. I don't know the man. But if he stays at Jackson State for a long time, I'm very curious to see how far that they can take this. You know, how they can use Travis Hunter's decision as a way to sell that this is something that can work, and whether they can actually start signing top 50 classes, top 25 classes, and getting kids that are, 4 or 5 star prospects to consider them. And and if they do, they could become the biggest football powerhouse the FCS has ever seen. And, it might be something that causes the other programs to invest into their programs more. It might be something that gets more television rights, which then infuses more money into those programs. Like Travis Hunter, I don't know how it's going to go, but I think it's very admirable the young man found something that he could believe in and dedicated his college career and potentially the future of his football career to that cause.
Well said. Deion has it in his hands right now. I mean, if he wants to stick around and build that up, that would be incredible. But yeah, I'm sure there will be plenty of people coming after him with big blank checks. Ari, in terms of the coaching carousel, I mean, that was madness, obviously. So many jobs open, but not just so many jobs, so many big jobs. Very short turnaround for a lot of these new coaches, too, in terms of the first signing day. Have there been any trends or anything that was notable in terms of some of the new schools with new coaches and things that maybe stood out to you, as far as their recruiting classes go?
I'm sorry. I think you broke up there just a little bit. Can you re-ask that question? I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. There's obviously the coaching carousel was crazy. It's so many, not only just jobs open, but massive jobs open. And, Brent Venables hasn't had a lot of time just yet at Oklahoma or, Cristobal at Miami and so on, Napier at Florida, but they have had a little bit of time. Was there anything from the new changes, the new coaches that you've noticed on signing day as far as impacts or things that maybe will need a little bit of work?
Yeah, I think that it's really hard to get a sample size of these guys for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
During such a pressure cooker of a time. And, programs go into firing their coaches or losing their coaches knowing that this is when it's going to happen. It always happens in December, and when they decided to move the early signing period up to December 15th, which I think is kind of crazy, but that's just my personal opinion, that they were going to put coaches and prospects in very uncomfortable situations every single year. I know that wasn't the question, but I will say that I was very impressed by what Billy Napier did on National Signing Day, or the early signing period on Wednesday. He beat Georgia for Kamari Wilson, who's a 5-star prospect, and I think that is the first time Florida beat Georgia head-to-head for a 5-star recruit since before Dan Mullen was hired. And he has already kind of eclipsed that, and they got 2 top 100 players in the same day. So to me, that was a very encouraging thing to see, because I do think that Florida is probably one of the best jobs in America, certainly a top 10 job, and it just wasn't quite as competitive as it should be, in my opinion, against teams like LSU, Georgia, and Alabama over the course of the past 4 or 5 years. That's a team that should be winning SEC championships and building Alabama-like rosters based on where it's situated on the map, which is in Florida, one of the most talent-rich states in the country, and also in the South, with great branding and a logo that all these kids can recognize as winning national championships when they were younger. So I'm very curious to see how Napier does. I'm very curious to see with a full year what Mario Cristobal can do in South Florida, which is the most landlocked, talent-dense area in the country and a place that he's from, and this is his alma mater. And of course, the Brent Venables and a defensive-minded head coach at Oklahoma will be certainly something interesting to watch. So, again, I don't know if there's any sweeping generalizations that you can make after just 2 weeks and a time in which it's impossible to create relationships that quickly. But, I will say that was the craziest coaching carousel that I can remember, because it wasn't just people getting fired or leaving. It was great jobs being left for other great jobs. I mean, when was the last time, Notre Dame, Oregon, Oklahoma, USC, and all these jobs were open at the same time? I can't remember if there's ever been a time like that. And, I'll leave you with this. College football underwent a lot of changes at once. They changed recruiting calendars. They make new recruiting rules, NIL, the introduction of NIL, the one-time transfer rule, all these things that happened all at the same time. And I think what we're seeing right now is the seismic shift in the sport and it trying to center itself based on the craziness that's happening. And my hope is, and I think it's the fans' hope, that eventually we'll get back to a point where it kind of settles down a little bit. You can kind of have some continuity instead of some massive overhauls of every program after every year. But the market is correcting itself and reacting to these massive rule changes, and I'm, like everything else, very curious to see how it all maps out here in the next 2, 3, 4 years.
Ari, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime, guys. You take care of yourself, okay?
You got it.
Yeah, Ari, I actually want to ask you your thoughts on Urban Meyer and the way the situation with the Jaguars ended.
Yeah, I covered him for 7 years at Ohio State before I took this national job, and I will say that I'm kind of surprised at how big of a disaster it's been. And I mean, I've read all those same reports that you have and some of the things that he's being accused of there, and I'm kind of floored by it, to be honest. So, I know that he's had his issues. He had his issues at Ohio State. He had his issues at Florida. But, the way these issues have been described of putting his hands on a player and, disrespecting his assistants and all those types of things are things that would be foreign to me during my time at Ohio State. And the general curiosity of this would be is Urban Meyer an employable figure in the college ranks again? Can a college administrator who wants to get football back on track in school hire him? And I think that there's some question to that with what's happened outside of football and the chaos that he's created around himself. And, I'm wondering if he'll have another job in the future. 2 or 3 years, things happen, things change, memories fade, and all of a sudden you got a 3-time national championship coach ready to join the college ranks again. It could happen, But right now I just kind of think he's going to be away from the game for a while. And based on what I've read here, if any of this stuff is true, he probably could use it.
Ari, thank you. Ari Wasserman, great question to close it out on Urban Meyer with theathletic.com. There's a story that is in their section. It's a subscription site. And I have copied and pasted some of it. I will go over it at some point later on the top-ranked directors of personnel, et cetera, from those schools in the Big 12 to others around the country as well, and including Baylor or Texas Tech or whoever, Texas, Oklahoma, et cetera.